values the people of our great city and makes clear the investments that we must make so that all New Yorkers can afford to live and work in the city that they love. People living in our city are relying on the city's government to use their hard-earned tax dollars to deliver essential services that provide them and their neighborhoods with stability. The city needs to hold up to that end of the bargain and do our part to manage resources effectively so that all New Yorkers can succeed. New Yorkers are counting on us to get this right. New Yorkers need access to affordable housing, health care, early childhood education, strong schools, and reliable government services that allow families to thrive. But we have seen that these critical services have been weakened in the aftermath of the pandemic. We want our families to stay in the city and all New Yorkers to be equipped with the resources to pursue opportunity. To achieve this, we must make the right investments in New Yorkers. Our city services are the pillars of our city: libraries, cultural institutions, and parks. Where's Shaker? He threatened us. We have to put that. This is a pivotal budget for our city to confront its challenges, and we cannot afford to fail our most vulnerable New Yorkers. Our city agencies need adequate resources and staffing to fulfill their obligations. There can be no more delays in the processing of food stamps, housing vouchers, and other resources that New Yorkers need to become self-sufficient. This budget will have an enormous impact on New Yorkers to learn and develop, whether a family can keep their home or someone without one can finally transition out of shelter system. Budgets have life-changing consequences for New Yorkers, and that's why we must get it right. As you will hear from our Speaker and Finance Chair, our preliminary budget response calls for investing in essential services, housing, mental health, community safety, and educational opportunities that uplift New Yorkers across all 5 boroughs. As we continue to negotiate the city's budget over the coming weeks, we will continue to stand up for equity, progress, and what New Yorkers deserve. Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce the leader of the New York City Council, Speaker Adrienne Adams.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, or good afternoon, I should say. Thank you so much for joining us today as we unveil the Council's official response to the fiscal year 2025 preliminary budget. I want to thank Deputy Speaker Ayala for her introduction and acknowledge that we are joined. We're joined by Councilmember Keith Powers, Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa, Councilmember Carlina Rivera, Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, Councilmember Lynn Shulman, Majority Whip Savina Brooks Powers, I mentioned my Majority Leader, Councilmember Mercedes Narcisse, Councilmember Gail Brewer, the Sage of the City Council, Councilmember Sean Abreu, Councilmember Sandy Nurse, Councilmember Shahana Hanif, Councilmember Shaker Krishnan, Councilmember Rita Joseph. Yeah. Okay. I especially want to mention and recognize our amazing BNT members and the entire Council's finance team. So even before the start of our current budget cycle, the Council has made it clear that our priority is to protect essential services that New Yorkers rely on and invest in the health and safety of our communities. We have consistently said that the budget cuts made by the administration were far too broad and have negative impacts on our constituents and the stability of our city. Today's Council budget response makes it clear that many of these were never necessary in the first place. The Council's economists and fiscal oversight entities consistently estimated significantly more revenues and resources than OMB recognized. While the administration began to reverse course on some cuts, many still remain, and the mounting impact of consecutive pegs has been significant. We know working and middle-class New Yorkers rely on effective government services to stay in our city and succeed. The Council's preliminary budget response lays out a balanced and responsible path for our city to achieve stability. It's not a wish list, but rather a vision for the city's budget that fulfills our city's obligation to New Yorkers. It is a roadmap to strengthen our city government, while preparing for the challenges ahead. In our latest $0.35 billion more in tax revenue for fiscal years 2024 and 2025 than OMB's estimate. In our preliminary budget response, we have also identified more than $25 billion in additional resources from 2024. Together, we believe the city will have $6.15 billion in available funding for this budget. This does not mean that we can just spend on new programs, because we have significant programs cut there for future risks. Yet, it does mean that our budget is stable and that we can preserve essential services. The Council's budget response proposes using this available $6.15 billion to help reverse recent budget decisions that have been destabilizing from PEGs, address under-budgeting in the mayor's preliminary budget, account for expiring federal stimulus to alleviate the forthcoming fiscal cliff, and strengthen the city's budget reserves. Simply put, the Council's budget reserves reverses harmful budget cuts, invests in the replacement of expiring federal stimulus dollars for key services, and safeguards our city's fiscal health. It is critical to understand that the resources available to the city means we can achieve all of these goals, which should be shared. The Council response proposes using approximately $1.63 billion of those funds to restore and invest in critical budgeting for programs, allocates $500 million to the Rainy Day Fund Reserve, and leaves a $1 billion surplus for other fiscal needs that may arise. This is a model for responsible budgeting. The focus of our investments and restorations are in several areas that respond to some of our city's most significant challenges: affordable housing, 3K, and our public schools, CUNY, proven mental health solutions, libraries, and an array of other critical services that provide stability and access to opportunity for New Yorkers. To confront our city's housing and affordability crisis, we need more housing, deeply affordable housing, and more opportunity for home ownership. The Council is calling for a $3.6 billion increase in capital spending on affordable housing over the next 5 years, an annual increase of $732 million starting this fiscal year, to align with the mayor's pledge to provide $2.5 billion annually for affordable housing and home ownership opportunities. This includes revamping certain HPD programs to ensure they are more effectively being utilized to achieve our city's housing goals. Sorry. We also propose a $2.9 billion investment in NYCHA capital funding over the next 5 years to support repairs, maintenance, and upgrades for residents, while pushing for the thresholds of vacant units to be brought online faster during this housing crisis. Throughout our preliminary budget hearings, we heard from New Yorkers who shared what they need to stay in the city and build their legacies here. Together with housing, early childhood education has risen to the top for working and middle-class families. We need to strengthen our early childhood education system, which has been beset by bureaucratic challenges and undermined by budget cuts. The Council is calling for $170 million restoration of 3K and UPK funding, a $60 million total investment to expand full-day, full-year seats, and an additional $10 million for effective outreach for these vital programs to ensure every child that needs a 3K spot has one. We also seek to replace the expiring federal stimulus funds to support preschool special education with $96 million and the array of other student support programs that are at risk, like community schools, schools based on Schools based on social workers, restorative justice, the mental health continuum, and much more. I'm sorry. As I said in my State of the City, our students are recovering from historic pandemic-era learning loss that will require additional support, and this council is making our students a top priority. CUNY, as the best engine of economic and social mobility in our city, also remains a priority, and we're proposing restorations and investments for our public university system. True public safety requires holistic investments by the city. Our city's district attorneys made clear what is needed when testifying at the council's public safety hearing: investments in housing, mental health care, and programs that reduce recidivism and provide opportunity and stability. The council budget response is consistent with this approach. We know that New Yorkers across our city need mental health solutions that help people access support, avoid crisis, and avert harmful cycles that exacerbate their challenges. Building on the council's mental health roadmap, we call for $225 million in mental health services. This includes investments into mental health intervention models that help prevent people who simply need care from ending up in the criminal justice system and being repeatedly cycled through it. Forensic assertive community treatment teams, mental health courts, and supportive housing are proven solutions that need the city's investment at a greater scale. The council's response also confronts the issue of recidivism head-on, and we know it has been a focus of recent public discussion. We're calling for nearly $60 million in programs that reduce recidivism. All the evidence shows recidivism is reduced by ensuring the evidence-based interventions and programs in communities and in our justice system are reaching the people who need them the most. Yet, many of these programs have been the target of cuts or have lacked the investment over the past year, whether it was the elimination of $17 million from programs at Rikers, youth intervention programs in neighborhoods with high levels of violence, re-entry programs, or the failure to follow through with funding for justice-involved supportive housing. All of these help reduce recidivism and deserve resources, and the council is prioritizing them in our budget response. The reality is that nearly everyone who enters the justice system or is incarcerated eventually returns to their communities. The city has a responsibility to invest in programs that are shown to reduce recidivism rather than cutting them. The solutions are in our grasp, but they need the city's support and funding. This is critical to make our communities safer. There are many important programs and services that our budget response protects and invests in restoring: our libraries and their 7-day service, cultural institutions, and so much more that have faced cuts in the mayor's budget. The council is a responsible steward of our city's fiscal health. We have demonstrated our commitment to advancing a budget that is not only fiscally balanced, but also meets the city's needs to protect essential services and chart a path towards stability for our city. As we continue with the budget process, we look forward to working together in the council, alongside the administration and all stakeholders, to meet the needs of all New Yorkers who call our city home. Thank you.
We will now hear from our Finance Chair, Justin Brennan. You can clap for him. He's nice.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm used to that. Against all odds, New York City's post-COVID economy has proven to be durable and resilient. Tourism is back, jobs are back, and tax revenues continue to outpace projections, even as the rest of the state sputters. The people who declared New York City dead and buried have been busy editing their epitaph. The council's updated economic forecast, as the speaker said, identifies a combined $3.35 billion of additional tax revenues in FY24 and 25. That's above the mayor's estimate as presented back in January. The council also recognizes $2.2 billion of potential underspending and $550 million of in-year reserve funding in FY24 and 25. Our biggest budgetary burden right now is not managing costs related to the migrant influx, but coping with the extinction of COVID stimulus funds. Managing cost shifts and cuts from the state while navigating the harsh reality of saving permanent programs that were seeded with temporary money won't be easy, but neither is making ends meet for so many working families in this city, and ultimately it is to them that we owe a budget that delivers for all New Yorkers. The council's adjustments to the preliminary plan result in at least $6.1 billion in newly identified resources that are unaccounted for in the current plan. This includes an additional $2.3 billion in FY24 and nearly $3.8 billion in FY25. What does all that mean? It means that we believe that we have what we need to restore all of the previously proposed cuts and then some. Taxpayers should absolutely measure their return on investment by the efficient delivery of basic and essential city services. Is there a free, high-quality 3K seat available for my daughter at our local public school? Is someone answering the phone to help process my rental voucher? Did my garbage get picked up on time? Is the city still delivering meals to my friend's homebound grandmother? Is my local library open this weekend? The council will not stand for further cuts to essential programs and services that New Yorkers rely on. From day one, Speaker Adams has led this body by employing a collective bottom-up approach. The priorities outlined in our budget response today were born from weeks of preliminary oversight hearings and hours upon hours of hard work by the budget negotiating team, as well as all of our finance staff, and of course consultation with all 51 members. And that's why everything in this budget response is something that the council believes is worth fighting for. I think it's also important to note that we are mandated by law to have a balanced budget, and therefore we must allocate or save whatever tax revenue we take in. Unlike the federal government, which has debt and massive deficit spending, New York City has record reserves and steady tax growth overall. We maintain that the administration's blunt cuts were never necessary in the first place, and we'll be fighting for and expecting to see full restorations across the board, from 3K to CUNY to our libraries to our cultural organizations and everything in between. Hardworking New Yorkers deserve nothing less. Thank you. Take questions?
Yes. We'll not open it up for questions.
Put my book away.
Yes. You mentioned recidivism in your response, but the mayor's been taking a more law and order approach when it comes to that. When it comes to funding for the NYPD, were you guys willing to find a compromise there? If the mayor wants more funding for the police department, is that something that you would be willing to give?
Well, thank you for the question. You know, when it comes to the NYPD, the council has always prioritized holistic investments and an all-of-the-above approach, which I'm sure all of you have recognized, to public health and safety. And our budget response continues to call for investments in proven programs that prevent crime and violence while making New Yorkers healthier and safer. The mayor eliminated the academy classes, and over the weekend we learned that the administration intends to restore a second class that it previously cut. Our focus has been on prevention, because that's also the way to support the NYPD and not having to respond to incidents outside of their purview, so they can focus on what they're actually charged with handling. We do have another budget hearing with the NYPD once the executive budget is released, and we look forward to discovering and asking more questions in that hearing.
Hi. Could you just explain, and I apologize if this was explained in depth, where is this additional more than $6 billion in the newly available funds mainly coming from? Is it a bunch of places? And just explain a little bit.
Sure. It's mainly coming from tax revenue, higher than expected tax revenue. I want to make sure I get your numbers right. Higher than expected tax revenue, as well as underfunding. So money that was allocated that hasn't been spent. So you've got $3.35 billion in additional tax revenue for FY24 and 25, and then $2.2 billion, which we believe in potential underspending, and then $550 million in-year reserve funding. So money that was set aside that hasn't been spent.
And could you, one more follow-up, you mentioned that the biggest financial threat is the kind of the sunsetting. Do we have an estimate on how much exactly in this next fiscal year? I know a lot of the stuff kind of ends at either this fiscal year or next fiscal year, but is there any kind of idea of how much that could be?
Most of it is in education. We believe it's somewhere north of $2 billion. But part of why we're feeling confident is because there's enough money there to cover that. But most of the lion's share of it is in education. I can get you exact numbers, but it's something north of $2 billion.
A big part of the mayor's cuts was a hiring freeze, which his staff announced was lifted during one of your hearings a couple of weeks back, but we're still in an attrition hiring phase. Is the council calling for, with this available revenue, to move out of that phase? And the mayor has been ramping up hiring. Has he been doing enough to fill out the city workforce of late?
I think saying that the hiring freeze is over and actually hiring people are two different things. I think we're still seeing a super slow, like molasses pace of actually hiring new workers. And we hear that directly from commissioners who are desperate to hire up and staff up. So obviously it's something, even with the hiring freeze, there's still a lot of positions that have been unfilled that they're allowed to hire for right now that they're not. So the council's been doing its part with job town halls and hiring fairs and stuff, but it's not enough. We really need a robust approach citywide to get people not only to apply, but for it not to take 6 months to get them onboarded.
And you are seeing, apologies, that's mine. You are seeing that onboarding is taking like 8 months, that long?
Yeah, if not longer. I mean, it always has, but even now when we're really desperate for workers, it hasn't been expedited in any way.
Madam Speaker, I was wondering, your revenue projections, obviously you're saying earlier they proved more accurate than OMB's, they reversed already a lot of the cuts, they increased their revenue estimates. Could you explain, does that change the negotiating dynamics at all? Do you feel like you're in a stronger position now that you've been right about the revenue going into executive budget and then adopted?
I can't look at Katie when I'm speaking, sorry. It's a thing we have, we can't. Well, what I'll say is last month, the council's finance division released our own tax revenue forecast, and our predictions did exceed OMB's projections by $3.3 billion in FY24 and 25. We've routinely seen the council's projections closer to that of independent organizations like the IBO, and ours have been even more conservative than the IBO and other fiscal monitors lately. Our economists, which I'm very proud of them and their work, are estimating higher projections because of improvements in our national and city economy and higher collections in our city's property, personal income, and business taxes. In addition to the $3.3 billion in additional tax revenues, the council is estimating $2.2 billion in underspending, as was said, and $550 million of in-year reserves, which have to be spent within a fiscal year, from fiscal year 24 and 25. So with a forecasted $6.1 billion in additional available funds for this budget, we're calling for $1.6 billion in restorations and targeted investments, nearly $3 billion in restorations and targeted investments to be set aside to cover under-budgeted risks, and $500 million to be placed in the rainy day fund. And that still leaves that $1 billion surplus for other fiscal needs in the budget. We're being responsible fiscal stewards of our city's budget, and clearly the resources do exist to avoid a budget that hurts New Yorkers in our city. And we do believe that these investments are key. And yes, we are feeling very good going into this budget negotiation season.
Could you speak about, sorry, a follow-up. With the additional revenue, what's like the gap situation as far as fiscal 25?
You want to speak about the caps?
Yeah. We're not, the budget has to be balanced, so we're not seeing any significant gaps that aren't insurmountable. And I think to the speaker's point, I mean, look, I think a lot of people often ask, are we expecting a hostile budget negotiation season? We don't want it to be hostile. And I think if everyone can agree on how much money is there, or at least we're in the same ballpark, then negotiations should be productive and positive. That's what we want to see. But I think everyone agreeing on how much money we have to work with is really the first step.
Thank you. The mayor in January and last month laid out, or he said that there would be 20% pegs for spending on asylum seeker services and then another 10%. In the process of coming up with this response, have you had insight or been able to access the breakdown of what that actually looks like? And to what extent do you still view, if not the biggest risk, spending on asylum seeker services as a risk or a unknown for the budget going forward?
We haven't had any real, we've been asking for that for quite a while. We haven't had any significant breakdown of those costs at all. And we are expecting another, I believe, 10% peg on migrant spending.
So it would be 20, 10, and another 10.
Yeah, another 10, which would come out in when he presents his executive budget. But we haven't had any insight to the questions we've asked for a real breakdown of how that money is being spent. We haven't seen it.
Is there any concern that this process is just going to continue with, let's say there's a surge in migrants coming in the spring and, the shelter census goes up again, is it just going to be up and down in terms of making cuts, going back on them? I mean, are you guys concerned about this just going on and for the rest of the mayor's tenure?
I think it's hard to continue to call something an emergency that's been going on for two years. Depending on what the pegs look like for migrant spending, we'd like to see them because I think we can do a better job with what we're spending there. But we don't see that roller coaster continuing. And I mean, look, I think one place, and we've said it a million times, is the place where we agree with the mayor is that this should never have been the responsibility of a municipality on its own, right? This is the responsibility of the federal government. We appreciate the state stepping in where they can, but this should never have been our responsibility. But I think with tax revenues proving, more optimistic, blowing past even the most optimistic forecasts, we have what we need to handle it. So.
We're not doing all the time.
In regards to the migrants, do you think that the mayor's management and budget office were focusing then on the wrong thing by cutting costs to migrants and saying that that was what was causing so much fiscal straits versus actually focusing on the federal stimulus dollars?
Again, the way we see it is that this should never. The gap would have been there whether we had the first bus coming in or not. And I think that's pretty much what we realize, that the take on consistently relying and repeating and blaming our budgeting on asylum seekers, I think that we've proven that that is not necessarily the case. I don't know if, Justin, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been saying all along. The gaps that we had been seeing the past 2 years were really due to the expiration of the COVID stimulus funding. Those gaps would have been there with or without the influx of migrants. But anywhere where we can provide services but bring costs down, that the council would support that. But I think we've proven that that's not why any of these cuts were ever necessary, and I think the mayor has shown that by restoring some of his own cuts.
Any call or advocacy for additional transparency in its appropriation in the budget included in the response?
That's a
or is that
good
part of this
question. Handle that
response
Yeah, that's,
Good one.
we love that you guys even know what that is now. That was something that, only a select few people even knew what units appropriation were. Yes, absolutely. We'll have a full reporting of that. We can get that to you. But that's a big tool in our arsenal as well. Getting clarity for not just for us, but for taxpayers to understand where their money is going and trying to end this sort of these clumps of money and not understanding how it's broken down. So we made a lot of progress on that last year and the year before, and we're looking to do more of that this year as well.
Our BNT members started laughing. They loved that one. That was good.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody good? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Look at your cup.
Appreciate you all.
You gotta be present.